there, I'm Chris-Rachael with Fanboy TV. We're back with more of our exciting live South by Southwest Film Fest. We have with us
Michelle Williams with ATXEdition.tv.
And
Nicholas McCarthy, the writer and director of Home.
wow, a nice short name for what apparently was a very scary movie.
Yeah, Home is a horror film, and it's about a realtor who is asked to sell a suburban house. And when she goes to the house to do her first walkthrough, she finds this disturbed young girl in the house. And when she does some digging, she finds out that the girl had apparently sold her soul to the devil.
I hate it when that happens.
It happens
Kids
all the time,
never
too.
get enough value for it, do they?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not telling you anything else.
And we're done. Good
Well,
talk.
you can all go home.
Yeah.
Silence, just from now on. It's a cone of silence.
So have you been making horror movies for a while?
Home is my second feature, and the first film I did was a movie called The Pact, and that premiered at Sundance 2 years ago. And right after the premiere, I felt like I had to, go write something, so I went to a cabin in the woods, literally.
That's another movie. It's just a
Right.
string of horror
But it
movies.
wasn't. It was an actual cabin in the woods. It wasn't like a ironic,
Yeah.
experience. And soon afterwards, I came back with this idea, which had its root actually when I was at Sundance, because a cab driver had told me when he was giving me a ride back to my condo that he in fact had sold his soul to the devil.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so,
Because cab drivers are really bored.
yeah. Apparently, it didn't do much for him though, because he was just driving a cab.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Right.
you don't know. Maybe he's
That's
just
right.
there. Maybe it was to collect other souls by driving them around. And he found yours unworthy.
That's a whole other movie.
So I'm curious. One of the things I've noticed with horror movies is there's very few settings they take place in. You went to a cabin in the woods for real life inspiration, which is a typical horror movie set. Someone's suburban house is the other typical horror movie set. Is that just because people don't have money? I mean, I feel like the bathtub is one of those things that things constantly take place in, and my theory on that is it's easy to clean up afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the history of horror, at least kind of modern horror movies, it's also the history of low budget filmmaking and the kind of almost the classic kind of grandfather of them all is Night of the Living Dead, and that was a movie where these filmmakers had access to a farmhouse, and so they shot 90% of the movie in one location.
Yeah.
And what they kind of stumbled upon with that is that one can make a very effective and maybe even more terrifying movie in a contained place. So, you're always in some ways having to think with your hat on as far as the money hat, the budget hat when you're writing. But Home is kind of a weird movie because it's kind of a demonic film. It's a demonic possession movie. It's also a haunted house movie, and it takes place in multiple homes, which is where the title came from.
So the ghost is perhaps stalking the realtor through her profession?
You guys keep guessing. Now, what do you think?
I just want to see it. I don't even want to start thinking I know what's going on, because that's the best part. Not knowing what's going on.
By the time this is online, you can probably Google and find out the whole plot, and probably download illegally. So go ahead.
We would never
do
advocate you
that.
doing anything along
never
those
do
lines.
that. No.
But if you desperately need to acquire it, you should still wait and buy a ticket.
Just the title, the year, and then free download.
So have you always been a horror fan, or did you just happen upon doing horror?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've always loved all kinds of movies, but horror has been my kind of first love, and ever since I was a kid, when I watched these kind of monster movies on television, 1950s and 60s science fiction horror movies, and then when I was growing up, and I saved up enough money to have a VCR, and it was like that whole world of kind of VHS tapes where you just had no idea what you were getting in some ways, because these very kind of right next to a very kind of upstanding horror movie like The Omen, there would be something so disreputable and sleazy, and it had the same size box, so you don't and so I kind of got this education in the genre through video. But then once I got old enough to be able to go see these films in the theater, I would go, growing up, to every horror film that would open. And at this point, it's almost beyond explaining what the appeal is. It's like, I think a few years of psychoanalysis could figure it out.
So most horror producers start with some sort of fairly low-budget creature. What was your equivalent of the black plastic bag that's underneath everything?
Well, I think
Yours was a black plastic bag.
that's right. You're giving away the ending.
Darn it.
It's horror films. So many of them rely on the unseen, and there's a hell of a lot of things that we do in this movie where we show something, but there's also a lot of scenes where we just show nothing, and I'll be curious to see actually what works better. But that's the lowest budgeted solution is you just don't have a damn thing in there.
So since you've been writing horror and making horror films, have you had a chance to meet any of your favorite horror icons?
Well, here at this festival, I actually just met right before I came here. I met Mike Flanagan, who directed Oculus, which I'm looking forward to seeing. There's a director named Julian Maury, and he actually co-directs with a guy named Alexander Bastillo. They have a movie here called Among the Living. They're French directors, and I actually met them last year. They did a film called Inside, which I would recommend to anybody. It's one of the most disturbing and brutal and wonderful horror movies of the last 10 years. I think there's a whole other generation that, kind of inspired me, and let me make a few more movies until I meet those guys.
Now, I've met plenty of female horror fans, but I've actually never personally met any female horror directors and producers. Why do you think it's such a testosterone-tastic genre?
Well, I think the answer to that lies in the fact that there really are. We're kind of impoverished when it comes to female directors in all genres, which is changing way too slowly. At this festival, though, at South by, there's 10 midnight films. One is directed by a woman, Lee Janayak, I think is how you pronounce her name. Lee, if you see this, I'm sorry. But I know Lee because she was editing her movie Honeymoon right next door to where we were editing Home. So they're out there. And I think it has less to do with the material than to do with the fact that the entire industry is sexist.
Okay, hey, I appreciate
Frankly.
that.
Flat out.
I know you'll be shocked to hear there's more in the science fiction and fantasy realm of things, and we're getting a lot more female representation there than I think in the mainstream.
Yeah.
Still not sure why that is, but it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it has to change, and the thing that's most exciting about any genre, but in what I as a guy who kind of knows a lot about horror, is that it's that we have access to many different voices, many different stories, and if there's 5% are female directors, then there's like a huge gap. So it's kind of the thing that the genre has to address.
I think it would be fascinating when more women get into it to see what it is that women are scared of. As far as, because so much for me about horror is for example, what keeps you up at night? You're like, I don't know, we're just going to turn on the flashlight under the bed, lights on above me. No way. So what would that be for you?
Well, for me, the first film I made, The Pact, there was a kind of sense that I was trying to get at in it about waking up in the middle of the night and you feel that someone's in the house with you. And that was a very particular, kind of feeling that I was trying to channel and literally, happens in the movie. And it was something that more than one person approached me about, after I made the movie and said, that completely destroyed me, that that this person wakes up in the middle and there's someone in their house with them. As far as, I wouldn't know, there's as many different fears as there are people. There are the common fears. But women, I guess, are the primary audience of horror films.
Really?
Yeah, which is another reason why more women should make them,
Well, where can people stalk you in the meantime if they desperately want to see this film or not? Well, when can they see it at South by?
South by, we're going to premiere Sunday at midnight. We're also playing Tuesday at midnight. We're playing Friday at midnight, and then the plans are, we don't know what the plans are, but this is our premiere. Okay. And so we'll see what happens.
And where can they follow you online if they're just curious about your future films and such?
They can go to my Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/Nicholas McCarthy, all is one word. Okay. And look for the movie.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Check it out, people. Horror movies are too much fun.